You are listening to the Enormocast.
A couple years ago, Black Diamond introduced the ultralight Camelot, the baddest cam the world has ever seen. And frankly, you'd think they'd drop the mic right there. But like the over-caffeinated squirrels they are, the climbing nerds at BD went back and redesigned the old Camelots to introduce the new C4 to your quiver. They made the C4 lighter, broadened the trigger for chubby knuckles, and the Big Daddies sport a snazzy trigger keeper for smooth racking and deployment when the going gets wide. And then, probably after the 12th espresso, they did some little tweaks that only core climbers would notice when desperately run out and skittering like trapped weasels. You know the feeling.
The emergency disrupt system is now activated. 3, 2, 1.
So avoid the quaking and the beaded brow sweat by checking out the new C4s at blackdiamondequipment.com, or better yet, get them under your own chubby knuckles at a gear shop near you. So I've been laying on the TC Pro from Sportiva for the last few months, like that annoying guy at the gym who's still trying to convince you that trad climbing is the coolest thing you can do on a rope. Spoiler alert, it is actually. It is still the coolest thing. But what if you're like, Chris, I don't climb slabs like some muscle-bound bonobo. I'm more like a gazelle. You know, if a gazelle had opposable thumbs and a moderately popular Instagram feed. Well then, my little Bovidae, look no further than the Futura from Sportiva. Refined by the world's best climbers, the Futura excels in steep precision footwork, and the no-edge technology gives them unparalleled sensitivity, just like you. So if you want to go from prey to predator on those steep sport climbs and boulders, check out a pair of Futuras at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000
seats.
You really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Bad weather. No, later, anytime.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is March 24th, about 10 o'clock here in Colorado, and this is episode 172 of the Enormocast, part 2 of the conversation with Alpinist Mark Twight. And if you've turned up here on part 2 without having listened to part 1, I would recommend you go back and do that. This episode stands alone if you have some background in Mark Twight, but we're going to pop in right in the middle of the conversation. So it'd be better use of your time to check out part 1, which should be previous right there in your feed. All right, we'll go ahead and wait. Okay, you're back. The magic of podcast time travel. We waited, now you're here. We're all on the same page. And before we delve into part 2, if you guys are interested in what Mark's up to now, you can go to his sort of media conglomeration website. He's not even exactly sure what he's up to over there, but the website is nonprofit.media, and that's profit as in Prophet. So nonprofit.media, you can get linked to his podcast, the Dissect podcast over there. You can also check out his new book, Refuge, which just came out in February, a compilation of words and images by Mark. And I think there's some other stuff over there, but it's kind of a unique conglomeration of things that they're getting started over there at nonprofit.media. So that's where you can check out what Mark's up to these days. And I think that's about it. We pick up here. Mark on part 1 had just finished telling his epic story of Nanga Parbat being lost on the face, dropping some ropes, finding a pack, being saved by that pack, and getting down, only to start up again just a couple weeks later. And we move here to Alaska. That's where we start off on part 2.
So you went on to climb in Alaska later, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's where like the fast and light really, I mean, there's a couple of ascents in the Alaska range where it got pushed to what at least I think you found to be the end of it.
I mean, when Scott and I eventually, when he and I climbed the deprivation in There Goes the Neighborhood into 93 in the Alps, we're like, okay, this is great. This is great. The Alps are awesome. You know, I was done there. He was a visitor. So we need to, you know, I thought, okay, what's the next step? We're not going to take this level of technical difficulty to the Himalayas right away. There's got to be an interim logical point, and that happens to be Alaska. And it's easy to get to, turns out. It's maybe a little bit too easy to get to. So 94, he and I went up, with the plan, the standard Alaska plan. It was, we're going to do a new route on Mount Hunter, and then we're probably going to just blast up the Infinite Spur, and then we'll probably do finish off on the Cassin because we got 6 weeks. Why isn't that possible? Then the Alaska factor kicks in, and then we end up in waiting in base camp for 3 weeks or bad weather or 4 weeks or whatever the fuck it was, and a bunch of shit happened. We started up the route that would become that same season, the Wall of Shadows,
right,
that Greg Child and Michael Kennedy did. We started up that. There was a pitch where Scott was like, that's as close as I've ever come in to take like a 200-foot fall before. And I mean, just super thin ice, and it was it looked in condition, but it was not to get, certainly in the way that we were interested in doing, because we were not interested in like the way that Michael and Greg eventually did it, which involved, bit more heavy lifting, shall we say.
Right.
And so, but we realized that was the fault was with us, with our decision, like looking at the terrain and thinking we could blast it,
right,
in the way that, when Benoit Grison and Yves Tedeschi did what was the French route on the left side of Hunter. I think they did it in 6 days. But they fucking they did what they do in the Alps. And we thought we could do that slightly to the right on more technical terrain, but we weren't seeing correctly, right, in a way. So we were looking at terrain that the lightweight tactics, that our lightweight tactics could not be adapted to. So we had to fail in a way. We came down, more bad weather, blah, blah, blah. Look at the right side of the buttress, and the route that became deprivation. We're like, that one we can do. There's enough easy terrain interspersed with hard technical climbing that we can probably do this really fast. And we had decided that it was going to take 72 hours round trip, and that's exactly what we did it in, but only because we didn't really sleep the second night. And to me, that was sort of the expression. Okay, we're going to do some hard, and there were some what I would consider technical pitches, certainly for 94, and certainly for the mountains and that situation. Even though you can see the airstrip, it's still pretty fucking scary, shit place. And that was sort of where we applied that vision. But we were so fried after that when we were trying to convince ourselves to go over to 4 Acre afterwards, and we were just fucking cooked. So the whole idea of like doing a new route whatever on the big three never happened. Colin can do it, but that's now, and he's him.
Right.
So after that and that experience, I mean, there were a couple of other things that led to, a somewhat depleted emotional state after deprivation.
Well, what was that the same season that Greg and Michael showed up?
Yeah.
Did the Wall of Shadows? Yeah. Okay. So, because I've talked to him about that just recently, and it was a funny image because he talked about how everybody shows up in that same spot, whether you go up the West Butt or whatever, and you guys like crawled off to the sort of the cool kids camp like a couple 100 yards away.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, it sounds like the sort of like the who's who like Alaska climbing was there at that moment.
There was a night.
I mean, he thinks Jay Smith was there. He was just rolling this off his head, so he doesn't really know. But he named off some names and
fuck, Pat Timpson was probably there guiding somebody. Jay, I don't think I don't recall Jay showing up. Conrad showed up,
right?
But he was off to do something else, and that was there was a beautiful sort of moment there with that. I just want to get him on the podcast and help him remember about he was pulling like a North Face one-piece suit, brand new out of the bag. He was flown onto the glacier and whatever. And somebody had not made the lower part of the zipper a two-way zipper. So it was basically like it's a one-piece suit, but you're not going to be able to pee.
Right.
So wherever you're going, hope you're not hydrated. And just watching this whole thing it was a beautiful sort of community in that way. And there was a night, and Michael has pictures of this for sure, because he sent me some dupes from this, and I wish I had an audio recording.
Yeah,
and this is like
he corroborates this lost fantasy audio tape in some giant snow cave you guys had built.
So Ken Wiley and Joe Josephson were there.
Yeah, that's right. That's another name you mentioned.
And I can't remember who was, and Steve Massioli was there, and Greg and Michael and myself and Scott, and Ken, the bad weather, they're just like fucking digging the snow cave. They made this gigantic, like, I don't know how big it was, but it was enough for all of us to be in there. And I was at a point where, that night was fucking amazing. Like, whatever conversations happen, maybe it's good that there's no recording. Maybe it's like,
because it wasn't very good after all. Like,
I think it was probably pretty good, but maybe not. Who knows? There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of alcohol. There was a lot of fucking repressed. Like, we were just trying to keep the beasts in check because of the bad weather.
Right.
And at that time also, and when you read the third issue of Rays, there you will. Where I wrote about this rescue that had happened earlier. Slightly earlier, before those guys showed up, that there were some guys on Mount Hunter, and something had happened, and they were fucked up, and they wanted a rescue. And Scott and I were in base camp, and when the radio call came in, and Annie called us over, and I started talking to him on the radio, and like trying to get some more information about that, the whole thing. And there's part of it. I'll put it out here because the truth of that rescue has never actually been, people have heard rumors, maybe. Anyway, one other guy was in base camp with us. So they were on up above the Northwest Basin. They had been trying to do the West Ridge of Mount Hunter, and either an avalanche or a cornice broke or a fall. Two guys of the party of five were pretty fucked up, and they were suggesting a helicopter. The weather was too bad for the helicopter, and I was probably when the radio call came in, I was probably 2 hours into, a couple hits of LSD. And so I was talking to him on the radio. I'm totally fine with this, because at that time I was somewhat experienced with the, as a psychonaut, if you want to call it that. And I was, talk to him, and I'm this and that, and we're looking at the weather and talk to the Park Service, and, maybe they're going to come. They want to kind of look at it with a fixed wing first before they commit to helicopter and this and that. And I'm just like, Scott, we need to go. Scott looks at me and looks deep into my pupils and is like, are you okay? Knowing the answer, because he and I've been in that situation before. And I said, dude, I'm okay. And I know exactly where they are. And Scott's just like, okay, Twight knows, but if he knows where they are, he knows. I'm fucking going with that. One other guy in base camp had skis, this guy Mike Vanderbeek, and so we grabbed him, and we, after a little bit of a confrontational conversation with one of the park rangers who had finally flown, they'd finally flown in, and I remember this point. Scott's looking at and he's talking to the guy, and he's like, well, what are you guys gonna do? We're going to go fucking rescue those guys. And if you're not willing to like ski out there and front point up 2,500 fucking feet and grab those guys and bring them down, then get the fuck out of the way. And then we went.
Right.
And I don't know, Vanderbeek was, like fucking total VO2 max effort. Like, he's on the back, Scott and I are super fit because we've had like 4 weeks of acclimatization at this point, and I've been up the West Buttress, not quite to the summit, and that sort of thing. And so we just charge, and we're dragging Mike, and we get out to the and like Alaska dusk, whatever. But I'm just navigating by, sort of sensitivity. In a way, because I was quite connected to the universe.
Right.
And anyway, eventually we roll up on these guys. This storm has now started, so the helicopter's fucking option is out. There's nobody else coming. It's basically up to us. Tahoe Roland and a couple of other guys had like turned up, 2 or 3 hours later on snowshoes. And Scott and I had just we took a stove and fuel and a bit of food and one sleeping bag between us. Because we're just we're going to go up and we're going to fucking bag him and we're going to drag him down. And we get there, and those guys, they're a bit more fucked up than first thought. And then they also were not willing to move. And Scott and I are just like, oh, well, this is stupid because now we're in this place surrounded by seracs on 3 sides and it's fucking snowing an inch an hour. And we get through the night. Next morning, now we got to fucking drag these guys down through 2 feet of new snow. And I was no longer fucking high, and that was the real problem. It's eventually, now
how did I get here?
Exactly.
This is not my beautiful wife.
Exactly.
This is not my beautiful life.
This could be really bad. This could get really bad. And the end of this stories. We start I start breaking a trench, being the avalanche poodle basically, and start making a trench so those guys can have something, because we don't have a sled or anything. We just put these guys in sleeping bags and wrapped them, foam pads, drag them, and we get them down out of the Northwest Basin, and somewhere on the way back to base camp, 6 fresh Italians show up, and they're skiing down the glacier singing, and it was fucking amazing. And I could kind of communicate with them in French, so I tied in with them, and we're dragging one of the guys, and Scott and Mike and Tahoe and that crew, they're dragging one of the other guys, and all the way back to base camp, I'm just fucking dying, because the effort is so hard, because these dudes are fresh, and I've been fucking up all night or whatever, and the Italians are still, we're dragging this guy and they're singing, and we're dragging this guy and they're singing, and we get him back, and they get in and the fixed wing comes eventually and gets him and flies him out to Anchorage in the hospital, and so that had happened, before Michael and Greg had showed up. And so we had all kinds of great stories to tell in the snow cave. So I think the snow cave episode would have been awesome had it been recorded. But it's just lost in the archives. And but it was that was an incredible experience. And one of the last times that I saw Steve Massioli before he got killed on the North Buttress of Hunter. Alaska's a fucking fantastic place. But we learned on Hunter that we could go for, I think by the time we'd finally got back to base camp, we'd been going for 43 hours nonstop. And that was the key. There was combining the fitness and the technical skill to apply to these other routes. And that's how really all the single push stuff, we started to realize oh, wow. Well, 24 hours nonstop is no problem. Probably then 36, yeah, you're a little tired, but you're still making good decisions. I suspect, and this was my hypothesis, later proved true, that at 48 hours you shouldn't be making critical decisions anymore.
Right, and that was the Slovak Direct, right?
Yeah.
And that was into the 60s. A little bit of sleep with a cat nap.
Sort of catnapping, because we had figured out at that point.
You're going to catnap.
Whether you like it or not. You might actually be climbing while you're catnapping and wake up and whoa. Shit, I'm here.
It's driving to the mall when you don't remember it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, by the time all was said and done, from crossing the Bergstrand to, climbing the face and getting down to the 14,000 foot camp, that we were on the move for 63 hours.
Okay.
With some cat naps, but we had figured out at that point that 3 was and this whole process, if we talk about, going from the Alps to the early stuff in Alaska, so 94, 95, 98, and then and in 98 actually I'd climbed the west face of Huntington with Bill Belcourt and then linked up with Steve, and we had our eyes on the Slovak Direct, and it was he had already done something. I think he'd maybe come from King Peak with JoJo for that. But anyway, it was too late in the season. The weather was shit. We flew around. We flew up the East Fork with Paul from TAT and like zigzagged up, basically up that south face and realized like, okay, this is more than us at this point. It's too warm. And I think we need, at least one. And I had thought like, okay, 2 teams of 2 worked pretty good on Nanga Parbat. We should try that. So the original idea was Steve and myself and Scott and Rollo. And then eventually through the negotiation, Rollo was like, doesn't fit exactly with what I want to do. And so it ended up being Steve and Scott and I, and we tried to acclimatize on crossing, whatever, for a variety of reasons. We ended up, we started up the face with the idea that, okay, we're going to get it done in 48 hours because we're acclimatized. We've been to the summit of McKinley already. We've gotten down, we've gotten rest, and we rested. We had our base camp that we could, at the airstrip, we always retreat to. We had cached 11,000 feet on the normal route that we were going to come down to where we had extra skis, food, fuel, etc. And so we basically set up these points of safety from which we could launch. So if you look at, like, you go, yeah, we climbed this thing in 60 hours nonstop. It wasn't like we flew a fucking plane in, landed at the bottom, climbed for 60 hours nonstop, and then, finished. It was like weeks of preparation and fucking gear all over the mountain so that we could go as light as we could.
Right.
Like, okay, I'm leaving behind this point of safety. We're at the base of the south face is like, we've got our skis, we've got tents, we've got fuel, because we ski to the south face with 10 days of food and fuel. Weather got good after basically it was good when we got there. And then after skiing up, we rehearsed the first 1,000 feet to know how long it was going to take and made our plan from there. And then the day after that we launched, and we were pretty light. We had 2 stoves and 22 ounces of fuel and a titanium pot for each, rack, whatever, cam, some screws, 2 ropes. And the total weight, but between us, the total weight was, we each had a puffy coat and a pair of spare mittens. I think we probably had a pair of spare goggles, but that was it. 53 pounds total between us, and 18 of that was, at the start, was water. So we had 3 liters each to start, and that was the plan. Was like, we're going to do 12-hour blocks of climbing, and then we'll stop and melt enough and drink enough so that we every time we start a 12-hour block, we will have had 3 liters of water during the 2 or 3 hour stop while we're melting all the snow, and then we're going to start with 3. Those numbers now, they seem about right. And I think we had enough food between gels, freeze dried food, halva, and olive oil and shit like that for about 48 hours. And the fuel for the stoves lasted exactly that long. Unfortunately, we were not done. And so if the question, if the point of that, if the objective was to answer the question, how light is too light, we almost found out. But no one wants to find out because then you're dead.
Right.
But that was really what we were exploring. Is like, how much can we get away with in these, like, okay, it's an Arctic environment. I mean, it's not warm and it's relatively high and it's not easy climbing. I mean, there was grade 6 waterfall pitch on that route. I mean, it was a pretty interesting and very demanding sort of thing. And it was the last hard thing that I ever did.
Right. And so you finished. I mean, if hour 48 came and went, you're out of...
Yeah, we're out of food and fuel, a variety, and we're still, and I think we had some 6 or 9, whatever, we had some liters of lukewarm water basically, right, and no more fuel. And that had to get us up over the top and down to our cache at 11 because we didn't want to stop at 14. Because the whole point was like, we got to do this, somewhat autonomously or
right,
whatever. And, keep.
So you mean stop where other people are?
Yeah. Where the Park Service has their medical
right,
camp, and it's like the big ass fucking camp on.
So you're just going to march
buttress.
Past that.
We're pretty sure we're just going to put the blinders on and like, fuck those people. We're just going to go because we know that we have, food and fuel and skis at 11. And
how much further time wise is that?
Oh fuck! It would depend on getting around Windy Corner, right, but it'd probably be another 3 hours from 14.
Sure.
To get down to there.
Sure.
And so we have not yet joined the Slovak route stays independent of the Cassine Ridge, all the way to the summit on this sort of steep snow slope, whatever. And there's some crevasses in it and maybe a bit of technical climbing at the top. But we decide that, okay, we're going to get off this. We're going to try and join the Cassine, which is sort of more known terrain. And I think it's going to be safer, somewhere around 17.5 maybe, or 18. I don't know exactly what elevation we would have joined it at, but we made that decision. And after the sort of last brew stop where we ran out of fuel, I was leading sort of the last technical pitches, and I got to the top of the one. I'm just like, you guys fucking unclip from the anchor, climb with me. I got trying to get the guys to simul climb, and they're like, what about the anchors? I was just like, fucking leave them. We're done. Because I'd like gotten broken out of the hard stuff and onto, everything else from there we could climb without the rope. And so they come up. We end up, I think we joined the Cassine Ridge at sort of like hour 53-ish. It was somewhere between 53 and 55. And then we get up onto the Cassine, and we had made a decision, and this is and ethically it's not something I'm not proud of, but it is also something which is to me was a demonstrative moment of like ethics. You can hold to your ethics until you're about to lose your life, or you can see it potentially happening. And then all ideas of like clean, of leave no trace, and all that shit goes out the window. Right. And in a way, that's, I'm not saying it's and I will never make an excuse. It's an indefensible thing, but basically, we, finish those last hard pitches, and put in a bunch of anchors. Like I'd probably put like a 6-point fucking equalized anchor into the rock, and we left one of the ropes there. The stoves were out of food and we were out of fuel, etc. So we put everything in a pack, and that rope coiled the rope up nicely, and left it so we didn't have to carry it. Because I was just like, I don't know if we're gonna fucking make it. We need to jettison as much weight as we possibly can, and that was a decision I would never have made in sort of like 6 hours deep, or 5 hours, or 12 hours deep, or even 24 or whatever. But it was like an ethical thing. Yeah, I'm not fucking proud, but I realized like I can answer now. How far do I need to be pushed before I will compromise my ethics? I'm like, yeah, pretty far, but not as far as others. Right. Certainly. So we joined the Cassine, Mark Westman and another guy, and I don't know who he was with, but they had just climbed the Cassine, and they were far enough ahead of us that there was no hope of us catching them, and that we would have good tracks because they were just breaking trail in the snow. And so we got super lucky there. It would have been it would have been more involved to get off. And so we followed their steps and basically up to the top of the Hilton Horn. We'd already been to the summit of McKinley I'd been there twice that year already. And so I was just like, you guys, let's turn left. We could go to the summit. We could fucking, it's part of my deal though, is not to go to the summit sometimes. And so we turned left and went down and descended the normal route and got down to the 14,000 foot camp. And, there was talk on the radio has been happening because Paul Roderick has flown by and he'd seen us and he'd, how high we were and this and that. And because they were kind of concerned. But Roderick had also said something on the radio, like basically, this is the best weather window I've seen in the Alaska range pretty much since I've ever been here. If you guys don't fucking climb this thing, you're hiking out. Right. Like I'm not come flying to base camp to pick you up. This is like, if you can't get this done in perfect conditions, dude, you guys are on your own. So we walked into 14. Enough Park Service people heard what had sort of transpired in the previous 48 hours or whatever. So Meg, who's a ranger, and she was on patrol, so she was, the Park Service, appointee at the time at 14. She comes out and she's just sees us, and all we wanted to do is get a little water. We're just like, okay, we're going to compromise. We're going to get a little water. It's a fucking slippery slope, man. You're just like,
there's like people with trays of donuts, just like you're knocking the trays out of their hands. No.
Are they gluten free? Whatever. Like, so we get there. We're just like, we're out of fuel. Just get a liter of water each or whatever. It doesn't even have to be hot. Like, no, bring us cold water because we're tough. Right. It wasn't even. It was like, can we just get a little water? We can get down to our cache or whatever. And Meg's like, hey, how do you guys feel about some toasted Spam and cheese sandwiches? and in the moment, like, and then it was over.
Right.
It was just like I smelled the food cooking. Steve smells it. We're just fucking done. And we're just like, all right, fuck it. We're gonna stop. We're gonna accept help. And so we ate the sandwiches. And then they're, hey, do you guys want to stay here tonight? We're like, we don't really have any bivvy gear. And they're like, well, the medical clamshell over there. There's 2 cots. There's 2 sleeping bags, but there's also like a couple thermarests, and there's this like massive down jacket and a pair of down pants or whatever. And you guys can fucking sort it out, right? We're like, motherfucker. And so then it ends up in this, game of Kung Fu Fighter, Grizzly Bear, and Cowboy, which is like rock, paper, scissors, but for cool guys, to see who gets what. And so I can't remember exactly how it happened, but, Kung Fu guy kicks the gun out of Cowboy guy's hand, and the bear gets shot by the Cowboy guy, and, but Kung Fu guy gets eaten by the bear, and I don't remember, but I ended up with the down pants and the jacket on the floor.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then, after whatever, 10 hours of, ibuprofen-induced sleep or whatever, we get up the next day, get down to 11, grab our shit, skied all the way down to base camp, and then basically the party started. And that party basically, for me was like, okay, we're having the wake for my climbing career, because, and I didn't know it then, but realized very quickly there, within a month after climbing that route, that I'm done, and I'm like, I will never do a hard thing again, because the next logical step is to take single push climbing to the Himalayas. And I had too much holding me to the ground. Like, I wanted to live. I really was like, my life was quite good at that point. And I realized, like, that's the next logical step, and I'm not going to repeat myself, and I'm not going to be the guy who's satisfied with like doing the classics later in life or whatever. And it was a moment where I'm just like, all right, Steve, this is Scott and I passing the torch, man. You gotta take this over. And eventually, and it took a little bit, but eventually, when he climbed the new route on K7 in 44 hours round trip in Pakistan, that was the next step. And then shortly thereafter, it was Nanga Parbat with Vince, and to watch that, to just look at, okay, I contributed to sort of an evolutionary chain in a way, or a chain of events. And, I'm pretty proud of actually having been part of that.
What's your relationship with climbing now?
I haven't been.
That was your career. We just did your career.
We just kind of did a career.
Yeah. So
in the sense, and I say that I quit climbing, in 2000 after that route, but I was involved. But for the next 9 years, I was involved in training military.
Right.
And we did a lot of cold weather, high altitude training. I did 2 trips to McKinley, where one of them was, I think the 2009 trip was great, because these guys came from sea level, and we got them up and down the normal route in 13 days round trip from Virginia Beach. And it was an interesting thing. A lot of what I learned in the mountains turned out to have great parallels and sort of universality to it in a way, to help teach others in different situations.
Right.
And I climbed McKinley again. I went in 2008. I went to the top from 14 twice in 3 days, because it was a trip that we had Rollo. It was Rollo and I. We had 8 Navy personnel, and I was like, dude, I can't do 4 to 1 to the summit. From 14, it's just not possible. So so by the time we got everybody acclimatized, so Rollo and I each took, 2, in one first period of kind of good weather. We're just like, look, this weather looks stable. We'll blast with these guys. We'll come down. We'll take a rest day, and we'll go with you guys. Just total hubris bullshit, happening. But that's exactly what happened. first day we went up and we I think with those guys we did round trip and from 14 to the top and back in 17 hours. Took a rest day, then went up and the two guys that Rollo had, one of them got sick and bailed low. Another guy got sick a little bit higher, like got up to 18.5 or something like that, and they turned around and the two guys that Heath and Dave, we went to the summit and back in 15 hours round trip or something on that thing. And the interesting piece sort of to all of that for me was that we climbed a lot with those guys, and consistently with a lot of the same guys over and over again, taking them from basically not knowing how to climb at all to trips to Colorado and Utah, and there was there's a trip in the Alps, there was a trip in Chile. Vince and Bean and Rollo got a bunch of the guys up Aconcagua on a trip that I couldn't go on. And so we got these guys, they got to do a lot of really cool shit. And we got to do cool shit because of it, to go, do stuff sort of courtesy of the U.S. government. And in a sense, my opinion, certainly with where the operations were happening in the theater at that time was all Afghanistan, and a lot of it high altitude, and a lot of it, basically starting later when the enemy got sort of smart, and these guys are having to like get dropped off with a helicopter like 10K away from the target and make their way through this mountainous terrain, to do those jobs. And I think we were able to, deliver, especially, when later when the sort of fitness and the nutrition piece came, and we're just like, look, we can teach you you guys how to be, moving for 24 hours nonstop, 36 hours, all these things. Like, there's certain aspects of this you can control. There's stuff you can't. We can teach you some of the controllable aspects. But later, most of those guys, a lot of our guys, when Extortion 17 went down in 2011, of the 22 SEALs that were killed, a dozen of those guys were guys that we had on, a bunch of mountain trips. Like guys that I'd been on top of McKinley with, guys, that we'd, climbed frozen water walls here and taught them how to ski and shit like that. I mean, it was, it was sort of, in a way, it was like a continuation of my climbing career. I'm just like, okay, I'm never going to get away from, having my friends get killed. And like, that's my relationship with climbing. That's what I think of it now, in a sense, is like, yeah, it was a part of my life that, that I, in a way I walked, I tried to retire earlier because I'd gone to, I don't know, it was 97 or something. I was in Chamonix on a photo shoot and had dinner with Alain Gersen and Francois Marcini and Andy Parkin. And I was just like, oh yeah, we're kind of the last men standing of that period.
Right.
And it's like, I'm sick of my friends getting killed, so I'm going to stop doing this thing. And then I couldn't quite, heroin addicts, they always try to quit once before they either finally do or OD. And
right.
And so I went back to it and it was able to, good new route in Alaska in the winter, and then the Slovak, and then be, sort of more or less done with playing at that level, because I mentally I couldn't do it, but then again I couldn't get away from it. And now the list of folks is pretty long, and some days I fucking hate climbing for it.
Right. Do you pay attention to what's happening?
Sometimes, like when every now and then one of my, Rollo will send me something, or Scott might mention something, or I would never have seen Valley Uprising had it not been for Jason Momoa. He's just like, you gotta fucking see this. Anyway, so I pay attention a little bit, and
I mean, do you pay attention to alpine climbing in the sense of,
like, do I know what David Lama's done recently? Yeah.
Yeah, and in the sense, again, of like, okay, well, where is it now compared to where it was when I, because, well, look,
yes.
let me say this, that there's some of that in Kiss or Kill. There's a, I listened to your show with Scott Bakkies, and there is definitely a lot of like, well, this is the way it was then, and it was, and jokingly, like, maybe not jokingly, but yeah, it was better then. It was like more of this, more of that. But and at least in the commentary in the end of Kiss or Kill was a lot of this, like, we've done the future looks bleak. Like, who's going to keep doing this sort of stuff? Steve House was there, but then who comes after him? So have you kept up with it to kind of evaluate in your mind, well, where has it gone, and has it advanced? Has it stalled out? Are we still fucking around? I mean, what's your opinion on that, or don't you have one?
On one hand, I don't have one. On the other one, people today are way better than we were. In some ways,
right?
Like if I look at the standard, the technical climbing standard in the high mountains now, and the speed with which guys are dispatching those pitches, that's what makes it. Like the fact that Tomo's son was able to climb finish essentially Northridge of Laytok this year,
right?
Like that's a technical, and those guys have technical ability far beyond. And this is something that, I mean, of anything in my climbing career that I would have changed, it's like, yeah, I probably should have spent more time rock climbing to get better, because I'm fucking, I'm shit. I was a shit rock climber. And I mean, I don't even have to assign a number to it. I'm fully comfortable with, my inability to rock climb.
Right.
But that's why I had Scott. Because it's like, and that was the beautiful thing about our partnership in a way, was like we each knew who was good at what, and when it was my terrain, I was in front, and when it was his terrain, he was in front. It was very simple. And but now I look at stuff and I realize, okay, the level of technical ability is a lot higher. The fact of finally, as far as like the vision, I don't know how much further you could. Like, I don't know that we saw any further than anybody ahead of us, and I don't think anybody else right now sees further than we did ahead necessarily. Because it's not, I don't look at it and go like, oh, this is a sort of visionary, like, oh my God, no one ever thought of doing that before. Because when Jumbo and his crew, they climbed the ISIS face and then chained it to the Slovak Direct, I mean, it's like, okay, that wasn't that many years after, we did the Slovak. And yeah, they were on it for 6 days or, total for the two things. But when Tackle and Dave Stutzman did the ISIS face, it was a fucking big deal. When that first ascent happened, I kind of think that when we did the Slovak in a single push, that was a fucking big deal. Those guys come along and link those two routes together in an enchainment. It's like, okay, I never saw that fucking coming. And so those guys were like way beyond, starting to look at things like, routes on Mount Logan, something that Tackle had been looking at for fucking years, and those guys went and they could see that, and they actually had the ability and the relationship with risk that allowed them to do it. And so now, I mean, I look at it and I just think, okay, everything is better than where we were, and it has been an incremental build. And if I look back and I said, we took great leaps, whatever. The only thing that changed, I think, between guys that came before me and after me is the fact that we actually, that we were, some of the stuff that we were able to do was based on a higher level of physical fitness, and that came from structured training.
Right.
Right. And then, and combined with, a very loose relationship with risk. But, and I would look back on my climbing career and it's like, and I would say, like, look, I was never a good technical climber. Everybody was better than me, but I was willing to die, which meant I was willing to try stuff that other people weren't willing to do, which is, right. And I'm not going to, I don't want to like sort of, okay, look back in the past, but yeah, the reason the reality bath hasn't been repeated, it's not a technically hard route. There is a grade 6 pitch on it. Maybe it's only 5+ now. Who fucking knows? But no one's going up there because they didn't have the same relationship with, with life in a way. The speed record that I set on Slipstream, 2 days before we did the reality bath. I mean, I know exactly what it is. It's 2 hours and 4 minutes. That's 30 fucking years ago. That has not been surpassed.
Right.
But the only reason that happened, I was very fit, but I was willing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's, and I don't know. I don't talk to climbers now generally, but if I do, or I hear them talking or I read interviews, I don't, that was the only gift that I had, is that I was willing to play for everything.
Right.
And that was, and there was an incredible liberation from that but then when that goes away, it goes away. And if you never had it, then you don't see things in maybe in the same way. And now, I mean, I sort of the what is the name of the peak that Conrad and Lama had tried? Is it Lunagri?
Yeah, that sounds. Is that the name?
I think that, you know. Anyway, so David went back recently, and he was on it by himself. Like, okay, that some serious technical climbing, and that is way fucking out there. I think that's a visionary piece. I think that some of what Uli had done was, you know, basically expressing, you know, high level of technical ability with a very high level of fitness. I mean, I think all of this stuff is, you know, I know my place in the time continuum,
right?
And I would never look at it now and go, it was better back in the day,
right?
You know, or whatever. But on the other hand, you look at what Kilian did on Everest. And when the news first came, and, you know, it took him 26 hours or whatever, and I can't remember if that was 2016 or 2017, but I just like flash back to 86 when Erhard Lauertin, Jean Toyer, and Pierre Bégin started up. They dropped Pierre Bégin because he was either unfit or unacclimatized, whatever. But they got to they climbed it in 36 hours, and then, you know, and spent whatever it was, hanging around 2 hours on top, something like that, hanging around, and then down, and it was 43 hours round trip. So, and that's 86. And then the next, you know, Kilian breaks the record. And I'm like, fuck, that's not like a serious leap forward. Erhard and Jean were fucking way ahead of their time. I mean, those guys were visionary beyond, right, you know, sort of anything. And then, you know, obviously Kilian must have thought the same thing because he rested a little bit and then went back and whatever it was, 17 hours. And I'm like, okay, you know, that's a proper,
right,
like, evolution, if you will, a proper jump, you know, considering the time interval in between technological innovation, how many strong shoulders are, you know, you get to stand on in the interim. And so to me, that's like, okay, here's someone with absolutely incredible fitness for one, but then also the technical ability to apply it. And it's, you know, something that maybe Uli could have done and maybe is done faster or whatever, but then, you know, nature intervened,
right,
or the nature of things.
You're living up in Salt Lake City, and, you know, this town and sort of the mountaineering circles have hit hard times in the last few years with Kyle and Scott Adamson, and
let's just, yeah,
you know,
we can go further back.
Yeah,
than that
we can
if
go
you
further,
want, but let's,
you know,
just...
those ones I'm sort of, you know, at least with Kyle, connected to or privy to,
yeah.
And so as you again are paying attention, and you have this experience, and you say that's somewhat of one of the defining qualities of your climbing career is this idea of loss. Like, what effect do those stories have on you?
I mean, I can go with Kyle because it's something that's actually fairly close. Because he and I had a, you know, sort of an off-on relationship, and at some point, sort of maybe, I'm just gonna say 2005-ish something. We first met, and he knew what I was doing with Jim Jones and the fitness aspect. He thought that might be a critical piece to what he wanted to do as an alpine climber, and asked me to train him. And, you know, we talked a bit, and I remember, you know, a couple of different conversations in this time frame, and I just said, dude, it's not the thing you need. Like, right now, fitness is not not the defining thing, and I think you should probably do this. And, you know, get in touch with me in 2 years. And lo and behold, fucking 2 years later, Kyle called. It's like, hey, I think I'm ready. I'm like, I don't think you're ready. And then in April 2015, I'm sitting in an airport. I'm on my way out to fly to fucking Atlanta, do a job, and then I get a fucking text from Kyle, and he gives me just enough information about. He gives me enough information. He's just like, look, there's some really heavy shit just, you know, happened. My dad passed, and I think think it's time. And I read this text, and like, fucking, hey, it's time. Like, I never fucking call people back. And so I sat, and I remember this very distinctly. I'm sitting just past the fucking TSA barriers and in the Salt Lake airport, and I call him back, and we have this conversation. And I said, look, I got to be gone for the next 2 weeks, but I'm going to come back and I will set this up, and we will get you ready to go back to Pakistan, because they had just tried the Ogre 2. So I set it up so that he could train at the gym. And I said, look, I will check in, but but here's what's going to happen. I want to have John Free run this, and he's not local in Salt Lake. So he's willing, wants to come, he's going to come in and out to sort of run it. But John has an incredible sort of, he's got an Alaska hit list. This is pretty fucking amazing, because just because of his situation, the way that technology is, and the way that you can set things up now, where he would do these smash and grab things in Alaska, where he'd like sit and wait for a weather forecast. It's got like a bunch of different climbing partners who have relatively flexible schedules on speed dial. And I don't know how many new routes in Alaska he did in like these, you get time off work and go up, and in like 7 days round trip, they'd climb a new route in the Ruth. Mm-hmm. It would never be stuff where you'd have to have a high level of acclimatization, because he lives in Portland. And so sea level, but he could go and hit these, stay in shape and fit enough that when the weather window opened, boom, we're gonna fly to Juneau or wherever it is, or is it St. Petersburg, somewhere southeast Alaska. We're gonna take a helicopter into the the zone around the Devil's Thumb, and we're gonna climb something. We're gonna get the fuck out. So I knew that those two guys would resonate. So I kind of set that up, and then Lisa's nephew Dylan, who was working in the gym and knew and was like a fantastic skier and ski mountaineer, would do sort of the daily stuff in Salt Lake, and then I would check in every now and then. So for a 3-month period, we got Kyle ready to go back. And I still have on my phone the fucking last sort of text exchange where, where I was laying into him about rappel anchors, about like the anchors don't get, they can't fail. Maybe even citing John Roskelley, back in the day, who wouldn't jug a fixed line that he didn't set the anchor for. And I'm just like, dude, anchors cannot fail, and if they're put in by someone else, you never trust them, and just then the next thing I know, I'm fucking making a contribution for rescue effort, which would have been the following year,
right?
But, it is. I mean, I can't. Jokingly earlier said, I fucking hate climbing because it killed a bunch of my friends. But it's just like it's a horrible way. It's a terrible lens to look through at life. Of, wow, here are some of the people who are, among the greatest at what they do, and they're doing what they are put on earth to do. And you know that by how good they are at it. And then then they're gone. And I mean, if we could have recorded podcasts, back in the fucking day or whatever. I mean, I did a bunch of interviews. I mean, the list of people who were important to me who were being killed in the mountains is too fucking long. I mean, I kind of made reference at some point that, when Alex Lowe was number 40 on the list of dead friends and climbing partners, I killed in the mountains, and I said that's the year I stopped counting. But then it's Godfrey Peru, it's Rod Willard, it's just like it just keeps fucking happening, and like whether you count, whether you pay attention, it doesn't matter. It is going to happen because it is a desperately chaotic and therefore high risk sort of activity. Mm-hmm. And then by participating in it, you develop psychological characteristics that what sort of barriers, what sort of filters, what sort of distance do we have to create in order to fucking deal with this, because it's happening all, it's not a year goes by when there isn't some other, huge change in the landscape of the climbing community. And and for me, I mean, I was maybe too emotionally sensitive to it. I mean, it's like a lot of times I only learned how to, love people that I was in relationships with after they were fucking dead. And that's a pretty fucked up way to live. And and whether it's I don't think it's specific to a community necessarily, and it was certainly, but it's a bit heavier here than when I was living in Chamonix and people would die. It's like, oh yeah, Day, yeah, he was skiing and there's a really slow, wet avalanche and he was standing at the edge of this cliff and like the weight of the snow, it wasn't even like a big deal. He didn't get like exploded off the cliff. He just got slowly, inexorably dragged by this heavy, wet, slow-moving fucking avalanche to this cliff, and nobody could do anything, and people were watching, and he couldn't do anything to save himself, and it was fucking slow motion, and then he went over the cliff, and then he's fucking gone. But it's just another guy. It's just one of 60 this year in Cham. So whatever. Then bring it here, and it's a tighter knit community, and the deaths are maybe fewer and further between, and therefore heavier.
Were you do you think you were, even when you were living there full time, sort of a visitor, interloper? That maybe you didn't, like you didn't know their family connections, and I mean the way you might hear.
No,
or was it you were younger?
No, let's say I'd say sort of 84 to 88.
Right.
Yeah, interloper. For sure. I'm a climbing tourist, but after being there full time and after being there, I mean, I when Fred Vimal got killed, I mean, I could spend time with him and his girlfriend, and Philippe, my climbing partner, when he got killed on the Aiguille Saint-Nom, I mean, I knew his girlfriend,
right?
And knew his mom, and like there were so the relationships, later in my sort of career there, for me, I mean, I was still, sensitive and connected in a way. I can't say like, look, my relationship with, for me with Kyle is touch and go, but the big part of that was like, we had this conversation going on for a long period of time, and I understood who he was. And that to me is like the bigger piece is look, I can, like, even just meeting you today, I look at you, and I'm going to put their quotes up here if you can't see. I'm just going to say, I recognize you. Like, I can see it. You've done it. The way that we speak, the way that we interact, yeah, there's a certain climber shorthand, but there are climbers and then there are climbers. And the fact that like I can look and I can recognize like, okay, it's experiences that have changed you. And that to me is the harder part, because it's not necessarily the families. It's not this. It's like, look, you are a contributing, an integral part to a tribe of which I am a member by having, been involved in the activity in a way. And that's what's the devastating thing for me, is like that the tribe gets smaller, that the collective experience and knowledge is diminished every time someone who is a part of that community, and it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be a big part of it, because you're already a big part of it by having participated in the thing and sort of willfully sort of separated from other more normal kind of sport, recreational, whatever activities. And to me, the only reason that I can live and do what I do now is because of the lessons that I learned in the mountains and the way that I was maybe sort of able to adapt them to other stuff. Like I don't call myself a climber anymore, but I am of climbing. Like anything that I do now, it is influenced, it is fed, it is fueled by that experience. And so when I realize, when it's somebody who's part of that community that made me, essentially, or the experiences that the community collectively has, it's what influenced me and my identity. When any one of those pieces get, taken off the board, it's it's incredibly powerful and moving, and sometimes I probably dwell on it too much.
Would you ever tell a young version of Kyle, or came to you, and whether it was for training or for just, you're Mark Twight, tell me about this, would you ever tell him no? Tell him to fuck off? Like, don't do it? Go ride a bike?
No. I mean, not my place. Right? Like, even if I can see the logical end, it's just because I know what, because saying no is a double-edged sword.
Right.
In a way. Like, if
you'd have gone, you'd have left, you'd have gone and done it.
Oh, fuck yeah. I mean, it's just like anybody who told me no, it's like, I'll show you. I mean,
right.
Like the obvious thing is, no, that can't be done. Yeah, go fuck yourself. Or that's not smart. Yeah, I know. That's exactly why I'm going. I think it's the more, responsible thing is to say, hey, let's sit down and examine all of these things together. Like are you naively accepting this risk, or are you knowingly accepting this risk? Taking it. Mm-hmm. Like, do you know all of the have you examined all of the possible outcomes? Because I was, when I was climbing, I was fucking ruthless about like forecasting the worst possible shit that could happen, preparing for that in some way, whether that, that doesn't mean like, oh, I'm going to take a bolt kit, because that's not the worst thing that can happen, that you can't climb the thing. No, the worst thing that can happen is something entirely different than, a lack of technical ability. But look, you need to examine all of these things. And so that when you take the risk, you do so having done the due diligence in a way. But I would never say no to something. Like, I'd never like advise someone, don't do that. You should probably play soccer.
Golf.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to make money? Golf.
Let's finish with the book. That was part of the reason I showed up. It's like, we've been at this for a while, and we have to talk about this book.
Yeah, pimp your shit, man.
No, it's
not even
more
that.
Than that.
It's kind of a bit more than that. Yeah.
I mean, when was the last one published? 20 years? No.
Yeah, 2001.
Okay, so nearly.
Yeah. Let's just call it. Yeah, nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah. So tell me about the book. It'll be out by the time I put this out. So it's out.
Well, it's out. You can buy it. You can buy it now. I mean, we printed it. On Monday it'll be within the last 3 weeks.
Right.
January 7th. I went to the print shop, and so I've been working on this book for 2 years. I've been working on this book my whole life. Whatever. It's people ask me about it. They say, well, what's it about? And I said, it's about coming down. I could just end it, period, done. That's what it's about. And the more detailed version is like every climber has to come down sooner or later. Like, you can't live up there, and you can't keep doing it at the level that you did it at a certain point. And some guys try, some guys stay. They go up there. There's guys who are, and some of them are, accept at a lower level of performance, this, that, and the other thing. But ultimately, you got to come down to the valley, and that can be, the universal point there is like you're coming down. You have to come down from high intensity, because high intensity is unsustainable. But if you can't figure out a way to live in the valley, to find beauty in the valley, to accept I have to say, like, okay, the trivia that I once mocked from, the highest mountains, the trivia down here, when that trivia became my daily life, I realized, like, I need to assimilate. I need to integrate down here, or I'm going to be the guy who goes out with drugs and alcohol, or I go back climbing again and I don't come back, which is essentially, when Escoffier died on Broad Peak in, I think it's 98, it's just like the guy couldn't be comfortable in the valley, and he couldn't let go of who the identity he was. He went back and he's got the fused hip, and he's all fucked up. And we had, talked on the Arete Cosmique. I ran into him and I talked like, dude, what are you doing? It's just like, I need to go back. I need to try and like and part of it's trying to stay relevant, part of it's trying to recover something, this, that, the other thing, but you got to fucking come down. And if you're not comfortable down here, you're either going to go back up there and die, or you're going to become an alcoholic down here to try and sort of insulate yourself, to figure out how to like, how to relate.
It's the rock star thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe in a way that's what that is. And so I spent a bunch of time, I'd have to say that, I quit climbing in the year 2000, but I'm still a recovering climber, in a way. And it took a bunch of years to see beauty in the mundane and to sort of reintegrate. And so the book itself is about that journey and sort of some things learned along the way. And it's not like a heavy text book. It's a photo book, sort of format, and some lessons learned about, look, this is how I was able to come down and survive. I'd been rehearsing it for a while, trying to figure out like, how does text included with a picture influence your relationship with the image? How does the image that you're looking at influence, what you've just read with the text? And building these, sort of multiple experiences with one set of words or one particular image. And I had grand visions for it in the beginning, and, or something. I thought, this is going to be and it turned out to be like any fucking climb. You try it and you fail, and you go down, you regroup, and you try something, different tactics, different route, whatever. And finally, in the end, I just realized, like, look, I had this idea of trying to involve. I guess I just went back to soloing and like realized, like, look, I fully believe in this. I'm going to fully commit to it. So after having talked with a couple of literary agents and a couple of publishers, and I just realized, like, look, this is my thing. I need to get this done. I need to get this out. And if I believe in it, I'm going to spend my own money on it. If I don't believe in it, I'm going to try and use someone else's money and end up with a fucking business relationship with someone that I fucking hate. And they're going to try and tell me what to do, and I'm not going to do it. And so, in the end, I was like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I want to do it my way. I'm totally willing to take the risk, financial and social. If it sucks, I'm going to fucking hear about it. And if I, lose the money, and it's not inexpensive to like make a hard bound book and print it, on a litho press instead of doing it digitally. And it was, through the whole process, it was an absolutely sort of incredible learning experience. And I don't, if somebody asked me what I do now, we publish these zines and we've got this podcast, and I just published this book, and I think I have a publishing company. Don't come to me with your book ideas, right. Like, cause it's fucking really hard. And so it was a fascinating thing, cause once I committed to funding it myself and putting it out there, like all of a sudden, there was weird sort of resistance from the universe, if you will, to all of these ideas. I was like, okay, we'll do a digital version, and we'll make 100 soft covers with digital press, and I'll sell those 100 books, and we'll be able to fund the litho version for that. Because like, if I want to make this book, it's a 200 page fucking book. And it's like, okay, it's going to be, by all time, all is said and done, I don't know, somewhere mid $30,000 to like throw down and get that thing made. And it's terrifying. It's like, I could, wow, that's a huge fucking hit right there. And so on January 7th, we started printing, and I want to know everything when I do something. Like, okay, go deep. You mentioned that in the beginning. We'll just talk about that with this, is that like, I decided to do a book, but that means to do a book. Like, I'm not going to, okay, I won't buy a printing press, but I'm going to go as close to that as possible.
Right.
And so I've been messing around with sort of this idea of of trying to, we have a t-shirt from our company which says Defend Analog on the front, because I want to bring back, I think that print is valuable. I think when you pick this book up, one of the first things you said when you picked that up, you're just like, fuck, it's heavy. I'm like, yeah, it's heavy in a number of ways, but it is good. But it feels good.
It's literally like it feels good on your hand.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Exactly. Which
I'm rubbing it right now.
But you don't get that same here. Rub your phone. Tell me if it feels the same.
It doesn't.
It doesn't feel the same.
It's cool. It's embossed.
it's a neat thing. I mean, and that embossed that cover art, Randy Ratcliffe did it. He and I did the reality bath together. And he's an amazing artist. I just wish he would go back to making art, which he's not right now, unfortunately. That's the Flaming Ice Tool piece. The Flaming Ice Tool sort of logo has been my thing from fucking 83 or 84 or something like that. And so he did it right. And so it's got to be on the cover of the book. But to make this thing was, so I had to learn the software to lay out a book. I had to figure out, okay, how do I, and the biggest thing is like, what you see on your monitor is not what you're going to see on the page. So like editing a picture in order to make it ready for print is different from making it ready for your phone or for a computer monitor. And all of these things I sort of had to learn along the way. And one of the reasons we started producing the zine was like, I need to practice. I got to do, so we got these 36-page sort of things that we can put out and we can see what, we can learn design. And a number of guys at Ross's company, if people had heard our podcast, they will have heard of Ross, helped us with design stuff. And like, I feel like I got this fucking very, very serious education. So when I went to do the book, when I went to get the get the book printed at Paragon here in Salt Lake, Andy, who runs the place, he's just like, yeah, a lot of people want us to do their book, and they bring us a fucking, text file and some photos, and they want us to lay it out. But this is the first time that anyone has come to us with basically the full layout, like given us the PDF that we need to plug in so that we can make the signatures that we run on the press. So pretty much from start to finish, all the way to the and I had great help from Chris Hamilton, who's the pre-press guy at Paragon, because I'd run up against stuff like, how do I do, like, the shit I see on here, it's not translating here, and this software isn't talking to this thing, and what do I do? And so I got some good counseling, but for the most part, it was, what I like. I like to know everything there is to the extent that I need to make something or do something, and it really is how it happened. And right now, it's out of my hands because it's at the binder. Down in Arizona. I don't know shit about that, but next book I make, I'm gonna know shit about that because I'm gonna go. As I want to learn, I want to learn all this stuff so that ultimately I can do it to the extent of my potential, which is exactly sort of how I approach climbing and the training thing and that stuff. It's like I just want to know.
Right. Jokingly, someone mentioned nihilism, when I started talking about coming and seeing you as Mark Twight. And I mean, I say jokingly because there was probably a Big Lebowski reference in there.
At least the National Socialists had an ethos.
Right.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
All right. But let me start again.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I thought about that, and, I reread the book. We were joking about the kidney stone and all that, but it was important for me to reread it because the context of my own life had changed so much from reading, if not Kiss or Kill, but even the original pieces, which is really my first taste of it all. Like I said, the Abattoir in 1990 or 91 or 92 or whenever it came out, in the actual Rock and Ice. And I can still picture the gray cover, somebody, two straight shafts pinned to that piece of ice.
So And I can't. Yeah, there was an illustration with, and it's not John McMullen, but it was another guy who did that illustration, and it was it was perfect for the piece for sure.
And I realized that it's actually, and this is my opinion, and you'll have to back this up or not, or shoot it out of the sky, but it's the opposite, that your sensitivity is actually the thing that's on hyperdrive, and what I realized is that, and maybe Jeff Lowe realized it, is that you shouldn't survive. Like, what you'd been through should have destroyed that sensitivity, or should have destroyed you as a person. I think in so many other places in life, someone as sensitive as you would have been destroyed by so many different things. So why have you survived? Like this, in this book, this is just the latest thing of, this hypersensitivity to the world.
Am I so fucking transparent, Chris? Now I got to make a joke about this because I think you just stabbed me in the heart, you fucker. I won't argue with you, because there is like, oh yeah, I'm a punk rock, no future, blah blah blah, and nothing. And you could go down the nihilist route and say nothing has any meaning, and therefore you can assign meaning to everything, to the extent that you want to be involved with it. And I'd have to say in a way that some of this stuff that gets done, like the Collaborate zine, the one that's out of series from Ray's, that happened. Like I was starting to feel stuff, and I was just like, okay, Michael, I can't contribute right now. I'm gonna make this thing. And over the course of whatever it was, 10 days, or so, I realized, like, look, I need to do this. I need to get this out. And a lot of this thing, like this book, I'm so fucking relieved that this thing is out of me now. I'm happy that it's out of me because I don't have to live with not having done it anymore, I guess. And I can't disagree about the sensitivity issue because I can't, go, it would be impossible to count, the nights, deep into the night, because that's when I write. That's when the muse comes. She's a single digit on the clock bitch, and she don't show up before midnight. And late at night, obviously, sometimes you get late into the night, some of these adult beverages are involved or whatever, but I just, I can't, when she comes, when that feeling comes, I can't argue, and I'll just let it go. I mean, I will write it. I will, foster it, no matter how, negative it is or positive it is or sad and tragic is the feeling that comes. I have to accept it because I won't survive if I suppress or reject. Like, I just have to let it come. And if I would try to relate that back to climbing, I can look back after the fact and go, oh man, that was cool shit. But why on one day I woke up at 5 a.m. I'm like, I'm going to catch the first cable car and I'm going to go solo the Major on, the East Face of Mont Blanc. Yeah, well, no one fucking does that from the first cable car, because when the sun comes up and the face goes crazy with falling seracs and rocks and shit like that, you'll fucking die. I woke up, I had that moment, and I packed my shit and I got the first cable car and I went and I did it. And then later that day, I was back down in Chamonix. I was at the guide's office, and you go into the Office de la Haute Montagne, and there you would go in and like contribute like route reports or whatever, like conditions and this and that. And lady's looking at me and about what I'm writing, and she's like, you should not put that in there. So why? She goes, because you're going to give other people permission to try and do that route from the first cable car, and they're going to fucking get killed. Oh, you're right. Okay. I accept that. This was the thing. I have to do the thing that gets in me. And once this idea of this book got in me, or once the idea of the zine, I mean, the very first issue of the zine happened in a way where, like, I said, hey, when we launch our first podcast, we won't have advertising, but we got to fund it some way. So I want to make a zine. And Ross is looking at me. He's like, when can you have a draft for me? And that was on December 6th of 2017. And I said, on the 15th, I'll have a draft. And in 9 days, Michael and I made a fucking zine. We went through 13 iterations before we went to print, but from basically acceptance of the idea to to going to press with it was 30 days. And I will, if I have the idea, like once that feeling is in me, I need to take it to the logical conclusion, because that is more uncomfortable for me to have that undone sort of thing. And that's not answering your question. Because I have no fucking idea how I survived.
It was rhetorical, man. It was rhetorical, but it was just an observation. And we've been at this for a long time, and I've been thinking about you for a while. I mean, my whole climbing life, but particularly recently. And I'm as impressed with with your endeavors and the things you've done and accomplished, aside from climbing, Jim Jones, the work with the military, which we didn't get into too much. You've got this biking, Jones now that you do. And, and so I think we're always, all of us who followed your career and again, from mythology to reality, whatever it happens to be, have been trying to unlock this idea of what makes you tick and maybe try to draft on it, to be honest with you. And in my opinion was that there was just this hypersensitivity, and somehow all these things where you're shooting in all these directions were an attempt to codify, modify, or deal with that.
Let me hijack this a little bit. Because of that sensitivity, I got to see things from places that maybe other people didn't see, and maybe they did see, but they didn't learn it. And I don't want to broadcast it now from the pigeonhole of being a climber. I don't want to broadcast it. I don't want to trying to communicate from the pigeonhole of being a physical trainer, or that guy's a photographer, or that guy's let's not pigeonhole things. The idea needs to be for me to sort of defy categorization, so that the message does not get confined by context. What has sort of proven, I mean, climbing has, again, it made me. And those situations in the mountains, those relationships with those people in those situations, those ideas exchanged in those moments when everyone is stripped absolutely fucking naked. Everybody knows what the other guy's weak. You're tied to two other dudes on these ropes, and I know exactly what their weaknesses are. I know what their strengths are. I know what they're afraid of. They know the exact same thing about me. They fucking see me. I can no longer hide here. And every thought that got exchanged in those moments that were that raw, they're human. The fact that the climbing was the means to bring those ideas out is irrelevant, because other activities, and it don't even have to be physical necessarily, but other activities can also bring out those same ideas. But the beautiful part of it is, and I couldn't see it when I was climbing, and I couldn't even see it 10 years after I stopped climbing, but these are human experiences. Therefore, these ideas and these lessons are universal. That to me is an incredibly important thing, that it's not exclusive, that when we say, oh yeah, that guy's a fucking rad climber and he does, and he's done these things and he says this, and you instantaneously create a gulf between the speaker and the listener who's not a climber, who will never be in that situation. Therefore, this information is irrelevant. I get in these situations with, where I've trained people for sort of these big Hollywood movies, and then those people go on that, to publicize these movies, and they talk about how fucking hard the training was, and the privation of the diet and this and that. I'm just like, you motherfucker, shut up. You're a human being and you did it. Therefore, other human beings can do it. The fact that you set it apart as something hard and difficult to attain is the exact thing that is keeping all of those other people exactly where they are. If you open this up and go, look, it was difficult, but it wasn't impossible. It was hard, but it wasn't painful. And I don't want to be the guy who says, hey, you can do it, because you probably fucking can't, but you can try. And for me, this whole idea of whatever I'm doing now, I want to close that gap between those lessons and the people who can, who will hear them the best, who need them more than other people. And not to set this shit on a pedestal, because honestly, we're human, yeah, it was hard, but it wasn't painful. It was difficult, but I'm a human being and I did it, and we're all human, and we're all just trying to fucking navigate. And that is ultimately the lesson of that book. Is I came down and it was fucking, there's no way to replace climbing. The hole in my life when I quit was vast. It's mostly filled. This is the lesson. It's pretty. It can be really fucking good down here if you take it. If you accept it. If you open your eyes and see it, it can be really fucking good.
You've come far, pilgrim.
Feels like far.
Were it worth the trouble?
What trouble?